it. Want to share with you all some strategies to vet and hire technical talent, but we're also going to talk about how to attract great talent because it's not just about you vetting them, it's about them vetting you and making sure it's the right opportunity for them to dedicate a really significant portion of their time over the next some number of years that they join your company, and also how to close that talent. How do you take it from, okay, we had a great interview process to getting them to join your organization? And why am I here to talk about this? So I'm the co-founder of Strider. What we do is we help companies in the US hire top engineers from Latin America and retain them for the long haul. I studied computer science. I was an engineer myself, so I've been on the other side of things as well, interviewing for engineering jobs, sometimes getting them, sometimes not. And I've also worked with uh, both the engineering managers and the engineers uh, hiring and uh, getting jobs and interviewing for those jobs. The teams I've built have been all the way from 0 up to 70, uh, and helped a lot of companies through Strider as well. So I've seen kind of horizontally what works and what doesn't uh, for companies hiring. Uh, so to set the stage, what I want to talk about is the developers, the engineers, the people that you're trying to hire for your software team. I think the first thing to understand is that it is a developer's market. It always has its ups and downs, but uh, on the whole, developers have a choice of where they get to work. And this is something really to keep in mind that your job is not the only one out there, right? You're competing, whether you know it or not, you're competing against the role that they currently have if they're employed. You're also competing against the other companies that they are interviewing at, that they could be interviewing at, and it is competitive. So keeping that in mind, it's not just about you deciding that this person is a match for you and you're automatically going to get them onto your team. You really have to keep in mind this competitive environment to make sure that you are staying competitive with everything from the details of the offer, pay, benefits, working conditions, but also market with the interview process and the vetting process that you have because engineers have expectations and the interview process that you have is really the only portal into what working at your company looks like. Do you have a long and bureaucratic process to hire somebody? Well, the engineer is probably going to think that working with you and trying to ship code is going to be a long and bureaucratic process as well. Maybe it is, maybe it's not, but those are the impressions that you can give off in the process. And also, engineers, because they have these multiple options, there's a good chance that they're interviewing at other places and have a limited amount of time to dedicate to any one process. So making sure that you have a competitive process in terms of, the transparency you show, the respect you have for their time, and the time it takes for them to get through your process. I think these are really important fundamentals to understand when you are looking at this talent and trying to bring them onto your team. Now, what do you vet for? I think the important things to vet for, of course, there's the job skills, the technical skills that they have. Are they a great engineer? Are they going to be able to ship great code for your team and deliver new product features or fix bugs, whatever it might be? But I think before all of that, what you should really think about is aligning the interests, right? Obviously, comp, that's a big part of it. Making sure that you have competitive market compensation so that you have selection of the right people, but also making sure that the engineer is excited about the role, that it's interesting work for them, and that they're going to want to stick around in that role. And I think that's something that you should be doing on that first introductory call that you have, whether it's with a recruiter on your team or a hiring manager, however you do that first screening step, making sure that they understand what the work is going to be like, what the demands are, and making sure that you have those interests aligned. I think that's really the first thing, because otherwise, even if they have the, skills, they fit culturally, if they're not interested in the job, well, there's really no point. So you want to be able to get those people who don't align with your interests, you know, out of the process earlier on to save everyone some time. Cultural fit, I think this is one that is really important, probably just as important as the technical skills, making sure that person's going to do well, be happy, be productive in your company's culture. Every company is a little bit different, so there's no one size fits all. And this is something that you can understand in that intro call, but especially as you go on and further rounds. So this is something you should be, constantly looking at, evaluating, and understanding. And then technical job skills. I think this is like the obvious one, right? Making sure that they have the skills to succeed, and having an effective process around vetting for those skills. These usually come a little bit later in the process, though there's some ways of, quickly vetting this up front, both through resumes and through some of those introductory calls. So in terms of interviews, I think this is an important point to talk about. We mentioned having a process that attracts the right engineers, that is effective in vetting them, but also makes them want to join your company. So here are my guidelines that I give when I talk to companies who are wondering how best to hire. So first of all, the live interviews, whether it's an intro call, a technical interview, final interview, whatever you call it, the live sessions, I would say 3 hours max is really what you should limit yourself to. I think the optimal time is a bit less than that, maybe 2 hours, 2.5 hours. I think is the optimal time. You can go less. I think if you have a well-designed process, you can do that in less. I know that when we're interviewing our own internal hires, that we spend about 1.5 hours live with them. But some companies want to involve more stakeholders, et cetera. So I'd say 2 hours is probably the optimal, and 3 hours is the max. In terms of anti-patterns in interviewing, one thing I've seen as a big anti-pattern is, and I've done these before. I've done these like on sites, right, where you go in and you visit a company for a full day. I did multiple of those early in my career to get jobs, and those are long, those are tiring, but they're even worse on Zoom. Uh, Doing a 4 or 5 or 8 hour long interview over Zoom is an anti-pattern. First of all, beyond a couple hours of interviews, sitting on a Zoom is difficult, and engineers have jobs, right? They can't always take an afternoon off. Uh, Also, I find that companies gain very little. I don't see that companies make better decisions after a couple hours long. And also, it's a signal that you're putting off that you're going to have extremely lengthy, tiring Zoom meetings if you're doing a 4 hour long Zoom meeting during the interview process. Uh, Decision making. So the way I think of it is you should be making decisions as fast as you can, right? So and I know that's not an exact number to give you, hey, you need to decide within X amount of days. What I say as a guideline at that last interview stage is that you should decide on that person, yes or no, within a week. But if you can do it sooner, it's even better. And why is it better? Well, of course, one, you're going to close out your rules sooner. You're going to get to work sooner with this developer. But it also helps you in the closing step because it shows that person that you're very interested in them. You think they're going to succeed and do really well in your organization. And I found that candidates really respond well to that. I've gone so far as to make offers during final interviews at the end. If it's a great fit, it's obvious. Uh, I'll make it an offer at the end. Uh, and then related to this is stakeholders, right? I find that beyond three or perhaps four stakeholders during an interview process, that you don't get better results, and in fact, you get worse results. Having a committee to decide almost anything, I find leads to worse results. And the more people you have, I think the more noise you get actually, and the less signal. That's what we've found when, working with different companies and talking to them about their hiring processes. So I really believe in having one person who's making the final decision and collecting that information from those other stakeholders rather than making it a committee decision. Now, you might have rules in your company that, if there's one no in the group, that, that person doesn't get hired. I think that that can work sometimes. But at the end of the day, I really think that there should be one person, the hiring manager, in charge of bringing that person on the team. And of course, they should consider and heavily consider the interviewers on the panel. But I also find that it's very jarring for interviewees to go through interviews with a dozen different people. It looks pretty messy and disorganized, and it's also hard to train all of those people to coordinate on what they're talking about in the interviews, so there's not overlap or duplication, and to make sure that they understand how to interview well also. So those are some of the guidelines around interviewing that we provide and that we've seen and that we've come up with after seeing a lot of companies over time. Uh, Next up, let's talk about what are effective assessments. We'll dig into that technical part that we talked about earlier, the technical vetting. So there's a couple different ways that you can do this, and really there's a pretty limited, amount of options, at least at the high level. Of course, like once you get into the details of, what do you assign in your take-home test, there's unlimited options. But at the high level, I think there's three categories of technical vetting that we can talk about. Those are take-home tests, so sending the developer a test to work on in their free time. There might be a deadline, of course, but it's generally they're doing it on their own computer. You're not watching over their shoulder. Two is technical interview, Q&A, right? Asking them technical questions, maybe it's system design. Again, there's infinite possibilities of what you can talk about. And then also is live coding, where the developer is coding live while you watch on your screen during like a Zoom call. So starting with each of these, so first of all, what do we think are effective ways of vetting candidates? We believe that both take-home tests and technical interviews are great tools to use. And usually, if you're doing a take home test, you're probably doing some technical interviewing, but you may not go in at as much in depth than if you're just doing a technical interview. So, a lot of times we'll use both of those in tandem, but we find that you can get great results with well structured technical interviews without that take home test. And that's a more effective tool for the job. So take home tests, some ideas behind uh, how to do these effectively, and a couple of pitfalls as well. So first of all, they should reflect real job tasks that you're doing, right? Don't just assign something because it seems hard or because other companies are doing it. Google assigns a binary search tree. It doesn't mean your startup should that's doing web development. But if you are, doing actual algorithm work, you probably, should assign an algorithm. So it really should match the work that they're doing in the day-to-day job. I also think in terms of time, try to design it such that it actually, and I say actually because a lot of people underestimate the amount of time something will take another person to do. Uh, have it fit into one afternoon's worth of work because okay, it spills over a little bit, okay, but if you design it to be longer than an afternoon, it can be much longer, and we find that, candidates tend to drop out at higher rates, uh, because they just don't have time between their work and, family, friends, etcetera, to complete this, even if they really like your company. And having it more condensed, you can still get really good signal, but you're not going to lose out on great people because of time constraints that they have. And the other thing to think about is the explanation, making sure to have a really, really well thought out description. These aren't easy, by the way. Thinking through these, making sure that the test shows you what you need, isn't too hard, isn't too easy. This is really tricky. And for me to design these, it took me years of trial and error and working through this with developers to come up with a good framework with how to build these. And that is like a whole topic for another day, which we will do. Uh, but you know, one pitfall I've seen is like you get your best developer on the team to design something that they say, "Oh, this would be easy for me," and that is maybe the wrong way to look at it. I've seen that model. I've had my developers do that, and they come back to me with something that is like way too hard. It's going to take way too long. I actually find that making them from the perspective of the person that you're interviewing versus your own team or your best, hardcore developer is going to get better results. So kind of thinking it through from their perspective. Again, I don't expect that to be the most in-depth answer because we could probably do an hour-long talk about that. Same with technical interviews. I think that's a full topic of its own to talk about like the design for those and how you structure those. But suffice it to say that it does take some, critical thinking in how you're setting those up, what questions you're asking, what answers or depth of answer that you expect. And then I'll briefly touch on live coding and why we believe that it's an anti-pattern. So first of all, back to kind of the principle of designing uh, these tests or designing uh, this work. It should be designed around actual work tasks as much as you possibly can in a condensed time format. What I find is that most companies, and I have heard one exception to this. I was talking to a friend who actually pair programs live a lot with his team. And I thought, hey, I understand why you do live coding, right? You actually do live coding in the job. But 95 or maybe 99% of tech companies aren't that way. No one's live coding over Zoom uh, on a regular basis. So, what does that live coding test for? I find that it tests for a skill that takes practice, but practice in training for the interviews. I don't think that's something that we should encourage. I don't think that a developer or really anyone should have to practice, rehearse, train a new skill for an interview, unless they're trying to go into a totally different field. The developer should be able to jump in the interview, take the take-home test, use the knowledge that they already have from working on hard problems in their job, and be able to show off their best skills. I find that live coding tends to test, again, kind of a trained skill that's separate from the job, and it also trains nerves. People who get nervous during an interview, which is a lot of people, especially engineers. I find that they're not great at interviewing all the time. They might be really great engineers, but they don't know how to interview. And live coding is a practice in how to interview well rather than how to code well. And please don't get me started on uh, when hiring managers say that they just want to see how the developer thinks. Uh, Unless they have a mind reading device, they're not going to see how the developer thinks in the live coding interview. They're going to see how the developer reacts under pressure in an environment that they won't see in their future job in almost all cases. So, okay, we've gotten through the vetting process. We've had this great uh, interview. You've followed all the guidelines that we set off. Uh, Now, how do we close this talent? Well, let's back up for a second and talk about something we should be doing from the start. It's running discovery. And discovery, if you've done any work in sales, maybe as a founder, you would know what I mean. It's trying to understand the motivations of in sales the buyer, but in this case the candidate, understanding what motivates them. Are they, happy or unhappy in their job? Are they really excited about technical problems, or is it the product, etc.? And of course, you need to make sure there's alignment, like we spoke about, but you also need to understand what motivates them and then personalize that pitch that you're giving to them, right? If you just start talking about how great your company is and how it's really hard technically, but the developer is more motivated by the product vision and or the teammates that you have or whatever it might be, and you're talking about something else, it might not resonate or connect with them, and you're going to have a lower chance of closing them uh, in the end. So making sure that you have that discovery, you're personalizing the pitch, and that this isn't just something you give 15 minutes at the end of the interview process, but this is woven throughout, right? And being available, answering questions to them as things go along is going to be really helpful at the end. Because again, I don't think closing is this thing that you do. There's no like trick wording that you're going to use on a call to get them to close. It's something that you do throughout the process. But in terms of what you do at the end to close them, one is getting an offer out fast. I found a couple things. One, I found that developers are much more likely to accept the first offer that they get. And why is this? I have a few theories, no scientific proof here, but I think number one is they get attached to this idea of working with the company. They get it in their head that they're going to be joining, even if they get a job offer later. That first one is really cemented in their head from the start. I think the other effect is like, hey, this company maybe moved faster or liked me and is excited about me. I think that has a big effect as well. And then I think there is an element of, because you're the first mover, you have an advantage. Okay, the other person can come in and make another offer, but since you were the first, you kind of have the, I don't know, right of first refusal is maybe too strong of a term to use, but you get that like chance to negotiate with them first. And, if there has to be negotiation because they get a second offer, you can do that. I think having like some reasonable time, I don't like too aggressive of exploding offers where you're like, hey, answer by sundown or, the job's gone. I think like people see through that. One, either it's like artificial and because you're not actually going to follow that, or they think you're really aggressive because you are going to, you know, not take them on if they don't answer by this arbitrary deadline, right? What I usually like to do is give people, say you give them an offer on Thursday, say I do two things. One, I ask, when do you think you could get an answer to us by? And let's say it's a Thursday, uh, if they say something Monday or before, I'm like, great, yeah, let's set up a 15 minutes to talk on Monday, so we can get your answer. Now, what does that do? One, you're not putting a lot of pressure on them. You're letting them say that because it is an important decision that they're making. They may want to talk to their family, may want to consult some of their peers in the industry and make a decision. I think that, again, the pressure feels lower, but there still is an accountability that they're not just going to sit on this offer for a month. And, if they say some other time, like let's say it's Thursday, say by next Thursday, I'm like, hey, we're running a process. We really like you, but if it's not you, we need to be conscious about keeping other people moving. Can we talk on Monday and try to make a decision by then? I've almost never had any pushback unless there was some like hard reason they couldn't do it by Monday. Again, in this example, uh, so that's my recommendation on how to do that. And by the way, there's one other thing that I like to do is have a kind of a catch to, if there's some doubts, if there's some questions, or if they might possibly say no on first pass, which can happen. Having that call set already gives you a chance to renegotiate. If they say no by email or something like that, I find it a lot harder to like re-engage with them and renegotiate or, try to convince them to join. So having that 15-minute call on the Monday in this example, if they come back with a no, you have, a little bit of a chance to try to convince them, which doesn't always work, but I've had it work in some cases and been very happy that I had that opportunity. So that's how I try to do closing. It's, lower pressure than some companies do, but there's still high accountability. It's still run on a good timeline, but it's also respectful of the fact that this is a big decision, right? And that trying to take a big decision by sundown is maybe not possible, maybe not a good way to do it. So that's the talk, but I want to give some chance to do some Q&A. And by the way, there's a lot of topics in that, and we tried to cover at a high level. There's some that I'd love to drill down into. We're going to do future webinars on some of those topics, like designing a good take-home test, designing a good technical interview, and sharing a lot of the knowledge that we've developed over years uh, to our audience, and would hope to see you on those in the future. So yeah, in terms of Q&A, I am looking forward to answering some questions. So let me hop in the chat and see where I can grab those. Give me 1 second. All right.
Hey, Neil, I'm going to join you on stage if you don't mind.
All right, welcome. This is Aaron, our head of marketing.
Thank you. So I figured I would grab those Q&As for you. We do have one in the chat from Alma, and the question is around templates. So if there's a process of creating a technical interview, is something like Test Gorilla suggested, or what are your thoughts around those types of applications?
So I'm not familiar with Test Gorilla, so I'm going to imagine. By the way, feel free to type here if I'm wrong. If it's like if it's something like what are those sites? I'm blanking on the name. I'm just gonna quickly Google Test Gorilla while we're here. I see. So my thoughts, I haven't used them personally, so I don't know that I can speak either positively or negatively towards Test Gorilla. But I've always designed my own. I found that to be the most effective way. I find that I don't, without being familiar with Test Gorilla, I find that like some of these other ones are really built around algorithmic tests, and that's my biggest problem with these other platforms that test for technical skills. It'll be like design, FizzBuzz, design, binary search tree in other terms, or it's like a brain teaser. So that's what I try to stay away from, is those like brain teaser algorithm questions, because I find that at least in the engineering teams that I've built, they're not very relevant, right? We're like building systems, web applications, mobile apps, backend systems. And those things to me are more oriented towards algorithms. Because why? Because it's easy to test a correct or incorrect answer with those automated testing systems. If it's a Test Gorilla or something else that's giving you an idea of like something that's more relevant to your company and the job skills that they'll need, that to me is interesting. But again, I've designed my own before, so can't speak as well to those.
That was a great answer. Hopefully that addressed the question. We did have a few other questions come in via email, but I know that we are out of time here. So we will address those questions via private email. And then if anybody else who has joined us here has questions, you can send those questions to us at
it's Neal, Neal, at onstrider.com. So look forward to answering any questions you have. Feel free to send me an email directly, and I'll get back to you. And yeah, hope to see you all around. Thanks for joining us.